Hello and welcome to APAC Games Weekly, episode 48. I am your regular host, Connell Suter, and as we always do on APAC, we'll be talking about the biggest news stories of the past week from across the games industries of the APAC region. Today, we have a variety of topics. We'll be chatting first about Palworld's massive success and how that's going over in Japan. We'll then cover Korean esports viewing figures and how they may be affected for the upcoming season. Following that, we'll chat about some new game approvals for China before finishing with a story about Indonesia and its immense gaming population. But to begin, let's chat first about Palworld. The Pokemon Company to Palworld. We intend to investigate. So, to start us off, I won't go on too long about how successful Palworld has been, as you've likely heard about it already. To anyone that hasn't though, in summary, Palworld is a survival game with cute little monsters that you can trap and then put to work on your base. The game has had an immense amount of success and has sold over 7 million copies just in its first week. So that's the main background that you need to know. But let's focus a little bit on those monsters that I mentioned. If you haven't, definitely worth checking out a screenshot, and if you do, you'll probably think, oh, that kind of looks like a Pokemon. You would not be the only person who's saying that. While the monsters in the game are unique designs, there's actually already a Pokemon overhaul mod apparently, and it seems that the Pokemon Company, understandably, isn't too happy about that. They released a statement titled, quote, "Inquiries regarding other companies' games," unquote, and that said, quote, "We have received many inquiries regarding another company's game released in January 2024. We have not granted any permission for the use of Pokemon intellectual property or assets in that game. We intend to investigate and take appropriate measures to address any acts that infringe on intellectual property rights related to Pokemon," unquote. Now, from that statement, some will be panicking. They'll be thinking their new favourite game is about to be shut down. But it's well worth noting that they don't mention a specific game or company. Now that's not to say that this isn't about Palworld, as it almost definitely is, especially as the developer of Palworld is based in Japan, making this a more domestic issue as well than an international one. But it is worth remembering that they didn't say it explicitly. Reactions to this statement have been all over the place, as you'd imagine, but tied with that lack of specific naming, I've seen a lot of people taking this statement as the game isn't actually an issue, but the Pokemon mod may be. You'll note that they specifically said Pokemon intellectual property or assets. Now, of course, neither of those things are in the base game, although these Pokemon-like monsters look like Pokemon, they aren't, and they are unique designs. However, this mod may be going too far. The difficulty with that being that that isn't necessarily anything to do with the developer. That's made by a mod maker somewhere and hosted on a mod website like Nexus or something like that. So it's a bit of a funny one. It's also interesting to note that the statement starts specifically with, "We have received many inquiries regarding another company's game released in January 2024. This has led some people to believe that the statement is actually more of a way for them to say, hey, Pokemon fans, we're aware of what's going on, you can stop telling us about it. It's hard to say if there's any credence to that explanation, but you can imagine that a lot of people probably were filling up their social media channels being like, have you seen this game? So this may be a bit of an indictment of fans as opposed to that of the game itself. At the moment, it's only gone this far, to the point of a statement being made publicly. This isn't a surprise as I've mentioned, the game has actually only been out for a week. It came out on January 19th. However, we'll of course keep up with this story and keep you up to date with it, but certainly it's doing incredibly well online at the moment, and I think we'll see a lot more success from it, a lot more people talking about it, and it's unlikely that the game is going to be shut down, let's be real. Now to some more disruptive news. Korea's top esports league faces worsening conditions in China. So, esports industry officials in Korea have said that they expect the League of Legends Champions Korea, which is the top esports league in the country, to face issues with financing and publicity in the near future. That near future being basically right now, as the season for 2024 has already started. This is all, unfortunately, despite the massive esports excitement last year, particularly around the Asia Games, which, if you've kept up with the show, you will not have forgotten, as it was about 3 or 4 weeks in a row that was pretty much everything coming out of APAC. While 2023 went extremely well for esports in general, and also especially for Korean esports, it seems 2024 has unfortunately begun on a bit of a rough note. As the new season kicked off, it appeared to fans that Huya, which is a streaming platform in China owned by Tencent, had stopped broadcasting its Chinese language streams of this new season. This is apparently the first time that this has happened since 2018 and has led many to be worried about how this will affect the season. When asked for comment, Riot Games Korea told media that it was due to the lack of a broadcast rights holder in the country. It's also worth remembering that Riot Games is also owned by Tencent. While they didn't provide further explanation, some industry insiders said to certain publications that the issue is related to a recent controversy around the esports group Generation Gaming, which goes by Gen.G online. They're one of the top esports clubs in Korea and landed themselves in some hot water last year, I believe, as they made a Facebook post that referenced Taiwan. Korea Times supposedly spoke to an anonymous esports official who does work in the Chinese esports market, and they said that that controversy was a major reason behind these issues. However, without knowing anything more about that commenter, it's really hard to say how legitimate a confirmation that was. We don't know what capacity they work in the games industry, in esports. We don't know what company they work for. We don't even have a name or job title. So do take that with a pinch of salt. Unfortunately, this is a real sour note to start 2024 on, and especially with the 2023 excitement still in recent memory. Let's hope this issue is resolved quickly and that the Chinese fans are able to tune in to this year's season of League of Legends, but yeah, who knows, it's certainly a bit of an odd story to begin the year. China approves 115 games in January, the most in a single month for over 1.5 years. So, we're kicking off 2024 with a somewhat record amount of game approvals in a single month, at least for the last year and a half, as I mentioned. January's approvals in China have totaled 115 new games, with that covering the usual companies that you'd expect. I'm not going to cover them, as we've talked about this a number of times, and it's usually sort of the same publishers that are coming up and stuff. Some people, understandably, are suggesting that this record number of approvals is quite intentional, with the aim of that being solidifying confidence in the market after the issues at the start of the year that you might remember we covered a couple of episodes ago about stricter requirements for games, particularly those that have gacha-like mechanics. It didn't do very well in the region, and it cut billions of value off of stocks. So it's being suggested this is a response to that, which is pretty understandable. As we saw last year, it's really impossible for us to say if this trend will continue throughout the year or even if we'll keep up close to this pace. But if it did continue, it would easily beat last year's total approvals, which was 1,076 games. But either way, even if just for January, it's great news for Chinese gamers, and fingers crossed that this number of approvals continues throughout 2024. And for our final story, Indonesia leads Southeast Asia in online and mobile gaming. So this is a new report that's come out from a couple of places. I think they're using a Steam report, and it's been now written into articles that are being referenced as their own reports, but it's still all interesting stuff. The data that they've taken from Steam highlights that Indonesia has had huge success in gaming and is actually doing really notably well. Steam recently reported that Indonesian developers had listed 256 games on the store just this month, which is seriously impressive. Pretty amazing to think that that's almost a game for every day of the year, and we're just in January. Second in that was Thailand, and they had 158 games. Still very, very impressive, but it really shows that gulf of difference. 100 more games in Indonesia just this month. Incredible stuff. Data taken from the Tourism and Creative Economy Minister, Sandiaga Uno, showed that in 2021, unfortunately a little bit old, the games industry created 140,000 jobs in Indonesia, which is really cool. But you can imagine that's even higher now. It'd be nice to see that figure for 2023. Wouldn't surprise me if a minister didn't have that, but hopefully we'll hear more about that later this year. On top of that, there's an extra little note which is using data from a company called Readser Analysis, and they showed that in 2023, 70% of people in Indonesia were exposed to online games in some way, which is really interesting. 70% is crazy high, especially compared to some other countries that are really quite similar in a lot of ways. The fact as well that Indonesian is one of the only languages that is fully supported on Steam is a real testament to how attractive that market is, and it is likely that we're going to see more exciting developments in Indonesia over the next couple of years, if not further into the future. Let's hope so. It's really exciting stuff. And that was it for this week's episode of APAC Games Weekly. As always, thank you so much for listening, and I really do hope you found these stories interesting and informative. Please join us again next Monday for the new episode, live at 12 PM GMT on YouTube and Spotify. But until then, I hope you have a great week.